History. We were able to get an exclusive interview with Mr. Scopes about the trial. He was able to tell us that the trial wasn't even meant to be that big of a deal and was supposed to be a publicity stunt to get people talking about the town. And it worked. Basically, the Butler Act, that this trial is based on, state that evolution absolutely must not be taught in any school because it interferes with what the Bible says. The American Civil Liberties Union, or ACLU for short, sent out a press release offering to challenge the Butler Act. Inception. A local businessman saw this offer and thought it was a great way to get the newspapers talking about the town. They asked the high school science teacher, John Scopes, if he would admit to teaching evolution for this purpose. Scopes probably didn't really teach it, as he tells us that he teaches physics and mathematics, but he at least accepted it, so he figured that he would admit. The next day, it was announced that Scopes was charged with violating the act. Ironically enough, the Tennessee press criticized the town for staging the trial for publicity. William Jennings Bryan was sought out to represent the prosecutor, as he was an extremely well-known anti-evolutionist activist whose name was practically inseparable from the issue. The story of Clarence Darrow's, the defendant, involvement is quite interesting. At first, H. G. Wells, an author, was approached to present the case, but he declined. Darrow, a famous attorney, was also approached but ended up declining due to being prepared to retire. However, once he heard of Bryan's involvement, he changed his mind and accepted. This is partially because he was a member of the ACLU. His goal was to debunk fundamentalist Christianity and was so insistent that this became the only time in history, well, in his lifetime, he offered to give free legal aid. When Bryan arrived in Dayton just 3 days before the trial, like half the town was waiting for him, ready to greet him and to listen to him. He posted photos and gave two public speeches, stating that he not only wanted to defend anti evolution law, but completely debunk evolution as a whole. Darrow, however, arrived the day before the trial with no fanfare.
Dayton, in Tennessee, to be crowded with people just 2 hours before it even started. When it actually did begin, William Jennings Bryan, the prosecutor, saw a massive round of applause. I'm sure that if you haven't found out already, many people of this town support him and his ideals of Christianity. On the other hand, when the defendants, Clarence Darrow and John Thomas Scopes, came into the trial, they faced a lot of the press, and the crowds of people around them were very tense. Ironically, Bryan began the trial with an extremely extensive prayer. Soon after, Scopes' students were brought up as witnesses to provide their testimony, and they showed a very sketchy understanding of evolution. Darrow then began to speak on the defendant's part. His speech was very passionate, one of his best, even past his work in the Leopold and Loeb trial. The main premise behind this speech was that the Butler Act was unconstitutional for promoting just one religion. Also, the defendants desired to validate the science behind evolution. Additionally, expert witnesses were brought up to be cross examined, but probably the most profound and impactful cross examination was when William Jennings Bryan was brought up.
Do you ever think about things that you do think about? Isn't it possible that it could have been 25 hours? There's no way to measure it, no way to tell. Could it have been 25 hours? It's possible. Then you interpret that the first day is recorded in the book of Genesis could have been a day of indeterminate length.
I mean to state that it is not necessarily a 24-hour day.
It could have been 30 hours. Could have been a week. Could have been a month. Could have been a year. Could have been 100 years. Or it could have been 10 million years.
I protest. This is not only irrelevant, immaterial, it is illegal. I demand to know the purpose of Mr. Drummond's examination. What's he trying to do?
I'll tell you what he's trying to do. He wants to destroy everybody's belief in the Bible and in God. That's not true.
As you can see, Bryan, when interpreting the Bible literally, because, he is an avid and devout follower of Christianity, is very contradictory, even admitting that when we interpret the Bible literally, it makes us question if what the Bible says really is true. Well, in the end, Darrow suggested that the jury take some time before deciding on a verdict.
Aftermath. The verdict is out. I'm getting signal that Scopes, as expected, was found guilty and fined $100. We are also reporting that the Tennessee Supreme Court upheld the constitutionality statute, but has overturned Scopes' conviction. The aftermath of the Scopes trial was saddening. After the trial, Bryan immediately began to prepare his unused closing statement as a speech for his rallies. He never got to use that speech, since he died in his sleep in Dayton the following Sunday. Scopes was offered a teaching contract, but ultimately decided to leave Dayton and study geology at the University of Chicago Graduate School. He eventually became a petroleum engineer. Smart guy, eh? And the Butler Act, you might ask? Well, it's still in effect. And predicting the surge of fundamentalism in the country, especially in the southern states, we predict that there will be an insurgence of acts passed to prevent the teachings of evolution. And hint, hint, there is. But the overall importance of the case wasn't the verdict, but how the Scopes trials increased American awareness and interest in the issue of teaching theology and or modern science in public schools. It also drew the attention to the divide between religious fundamentalists and modernists who took a less literal approach to the Bible and supported modern science, as well as the schisms between urban and rural American values. And despite the ruling, the public saw Scopes and supporters of evolutionary theory as victors in the case. But that is up for discussion. Who do you think won the case?